Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 619. Out now on video on demand and digital is Midnight Taxi, a psychological thriller that stars Ladi Emeruwa as a taxi driver who finds himself investigating the murder of a sex worker after he discovers her body during one of his late night shifts. A moody and engrossing murder mystery that delves into themes of obsession and guilt. Midnight Taxi also marks the feature film directorial debuts of Bertie and Samantha Speirs. So I'm glad to say join me now on the podcast. Bertie, Samantha, how are you both?
Hi, very good, thank you.
Good,
Yeah,
thank you.
happy to be here.
So happy to have you because I absolutely love talking to first-time filmmakers, but especially, I talk to a lot of independent filmmakers, and I love hearing about the stories of kind of like the kind of old school, almost kind of Larry Cohen-esque kind of guerrilla filmmaking tactics that it takes to kind of put a film together. But before we begin with that, Bertie, you're looking pretty much at 3 years from pre-production to distribution, right? And getting Midnight Taxi out there. How does it feel like now, knowing that your film's out there and it's all the masses are ready to see it? Is it a thing of relief, or, sometimes I talk to filmmakers and there's a thing of, still an attachment there. Oh, I still should have done this, still should have done that. What other feelings do you both have with this movie?
For me, I think there is a massive sense of relief because we didn't have distribution lined up before we began, so we're kind of making it on a prayer, like hoping we can even finish the film. I think there were moments when the weather would change. We had an actor cancel on us the day before the shoot. We've had so many scrambles to get it done and pull it off. We literally broke a computer because it was too much data in the footage in the end. And so yeah, just getting it over the line was a huge deal for us. And I think there is also the sense that we've been with it for so long, we're also just kind of excited to sort of leave it now as well. I think we've been with it, living our lives so long that it's good to see it get to this point and yeah, move on. How about you?
Yeah, I think getting it out there has finally got us to the point where we don't tinker with it anymore, because that's one of the when you write and direct something, it's so hard to get exactly what's in your mind out there, and you just want to keep editing and tweaking and fixing and seeing if you can make it better. And it's nice to have had it out there now so that we can't do it. It's complete. And I oscillate between sheer relief and sheer terror that it's out in the world, depending on the minute of the day.
It's funny. I think one filmmaker explained it to me that, excuse me, it's kind of like sending your kid away to college. You just got to you raised him all that time. You just got to kind of let him go. And that's kind of like how they explained it to me. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that's how it feels.
Yeah.
So Samantha, it's really interesting. Cinema really has this rich history of kind of like taxi driver movies, or maybe more recently, kind of like rideshare movies. And we can talk about the classics, your Taxi Drivers, your Collateral. The Black Cab, though, is so specific to the location in London, and I think we might have some here in Australia. I'm not 100% sure, but very much in London. It's very specific for that place. There's a history behind it as well. Where did the idea kind of come from to have a film set in the world of a black cab taxi driver? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, the Black Cab is so iconic for London. It's in the same way as the double-decker buses. You can kind of picture both alongside each other, and you see them all over the city. And I was taking a lot of black cabs near the end of 2019 for the film I was working on then. And it was just an interesting space to be in and an interesting viewpoint of London, because I'm obviously not from London. So I approach the city kind of with fresh eyes every single day, despite living here for years. And the cab kind of emphasizes the ability to do that. And it was just, you say Taxi Driver and Collateral, they're the classic yellow cabs that are in America that I associate with having grown up there. And the Black Cab is just, it's the London version, and it hadn't really been done in a significant way. So I was interested in that angle.
Yeah, I think we're lucky to live quite centrally, and we see so many black cabs all the time, and they just completely blend into the background of London. And we just didn't realize one day these guys are totally anonymous. Like, they can be doing anything or watching anything. If you genuinely wanted to be kind of an undercover police operative or an agent, it'd be a great thing to be in, because no one gets freaked out if there's a cab loitering outside their house or something. So we thought this is quite an interesting career, and Also, they operate all night long. There aren't many jobs in London. London kind of shuts down at about 1 a.m., but the cabs keep going all night. So we thought, okay, that gives them a unique working environment to tell a story in.
So, Bertie, you have this idea, you and Samantha have this idea, I'm sure you're working on a script and such. Now you're thinking, okay, we need the funds to raise for this. And you guys essentially are the producers on this film as well. And I've talked to lots of independent filmmakers as well about fundraising efforts, different things there, Indiegogo, Kickstarter, etc. How do you and Samantha kind of go ahead and get the fundraising happening for this movie? What type of resources do you use? And do you use, I know you two both have done all different types of jobs on big movies, small movies, TV shows. Do you kind of dive in and get some help from people within the industry as well to kind of give you advice and the best way to kind of navigate that kind of minefield of trying to find the right ways to finance a movie?
Yeah, we did reach out to kind of a lot of film industry friends and sort of ask how they would go about raising money. We talked to some distribution pre-sales guys to try to set that up. And honestly, most of those things didn't work the way we wanted it to. We didn't get the result. So we put together camera tests, a mood reel, a very long pitch deck, well, not very long, but a very stylish pitch deck. And obviously the script was ready. So we had quite a lot of material. And then we went around every single friend and family member for quite sort of individually quite small amounts, but together that built up to something. But even so, the film has a very low budget. So we made use of every pound we got.
Definitely.
It's really, yeah.
So you got that going on. And now you need someone as your lead actor, not only to personify the character here of Eddie, but you need someone you really have to trust because they're going to be on screen all the time. But not only that, the way you essentially have this film set up, and we'll go on about the camera rigs and everything else, is that he's going to be in that black cab on his own. And you're going to be in contact with him. You're going to be in other cars, cameras everywhere. But he essentially is almost kind of like a proxy director in a sort of way, right? Because you need to find someone you could really trust. Ladi, from what I can tell from his work, he's done great stuff on stage. He's been in screens, big and small as well. Interestingly enough, he was on that anthology film, the 50 Kisses film, which Bertie, you actually directed on, but he was in a different segment, right? How do you go about finding him, and how did you know that he was the guy that you knew you could put your trust in? So when on those days when you're in that other cab in front of the set, so to speak, of the other black cab, that you can make sure that he's the guy who can help you facilitate the information needed to the other actors and do the things that need to get done.
So I was lucky enough to just be a friend of Ladi's, really. We had worked together, as you said, on 50 Kisses I think we actually shot that in 2012. And he helped me out in another short films. He was the producer of my little zombie rom-com segment of that film. But he's obviously a professional actor first and foremost. And we sort of shot little things for people's reels and stuff just to help each other out. But we'd never really worked on a short together directly with Ladi as an actor. But he, as you said, he's very experienced. He played Hamlet for the Globe Theatre on the global tour. Yeah. And having that kind of theatrical training and experience meant he was one of the very few people that I would trust that he could learn a whole script backwards and forwards. And more than that, be a kind of like a calm presence on set, be great with any new actors coming in. He was really up for training because we literally spent 2 weeks giving him the cab before the shoot just so they get used to driving it. Luckily, he does also drive quite a big SUV, so he was already used to that in London. But yeah, and we did test him as well. We had a few other actors that we were considering for the role, but it was just obvious, like he was the full package and he was perfect for the role. So, I mean, when you've got that person already in your life, I think you'd be crazy actually to go out and risk get it all going wrong with someone you don't know. We, as you said, we were relying on him. Now, many of the other roles were people we didn't know, but yeah, that one role had to be that kind of situation. Yeah,
and he's a great person to have on set as well as being an actor, because he just welcomed everybody so warmly, and it was great help for us because we were such a small team. To have Ladi be able to talk to the other cast naturally and work through the cold nights was just brilliant. Like, yeah, we made such a good call with Ladi, and we're so happy with the performance he gave too. He really studied and practiced. So
yeah. Speaking of studying and practice, Samantha, there's always through cinema history, there's all this lore about when people, actors take on the roles of, like, say, a cab driver, like the whole De Niro things, like, oh, I was a real cab driver for 3 weeks, and all that kind of thing. What type of preparation does Lady do to character-wise, the psychological things, he get all that happening, but in regards to the cab aspect of it all, what type of stuff does he do in regards to that? Does he hang out with cab drivers? Does he drive around himself in the routes that they will have? Does he hang out at night and see how it all works? What type of approaches does he have for that character?
I think he did a lot of stuff that he didn't even share with us that he was doing on his own. We were lucky enough to have the cab available, so he would come and collect it in the evenings and just drive it around London while running the script. And we also had a real cabbie, Tom Hutley, who helped kind of bring in some of the actual cab world to it, like how the cabbies speak, how they drive. So Laddie made like a lot of micro movements of learning how to get comfortable with driving a vehicle, because if you drive it for 8 hours a day every day, it becomes like another limb. And he did a really good job of the casualness of like, oh, I am happy to just kind of do this with one hand while driving. And I give him so much credit for kind of figuring out the casualness that cabbies have, because it is for them. It's as easy as breathing for us. So he did a great job with that.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you will love. Bertie, in this film, you're essentially like a one-man camera department. And just the way that everything was set up is kind of like just incredible. So it's a multicam feed. You got 4 cameras, you got 8 microphones in the main set car, which is one of that is driving around. Then you guys are in a cab in front of that, who's driven by, what was the gentleman's name again? Samantha, you just said the cab driver who was helping you out?
That's Tom Hutley.
Yeah, he's also a YouTuber called Tom the Taxi Driver on YouTube. So check him out.
Awesome. Oh, definitely will. Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually a big fan of watching kind of like stuff. I don't know why, but watching those kind of YouTube channels. So you got Tom in the other car. He's driving you guys around. I imagine you have to maintain a certain distance to make sure you can get the signals and everything else in there as well. How much trial and error is there in pulling that off? Do you have to do like, I don't know, a week or so of prep just to make sure that the cameras are working, the sound is working, how much distance do you have between each other? Because I have spoken to other filmmakers that kind of done kind of similar things to that as well. And it's in pre-prep for stuff like that, especially because when you want to go, you don't want to mess around. You got, I'm sure, a limited amount of time to get this stuff going, and I'm sure the pre-prep for this would have been just an incredible amount of effort and focus put into that.
Yeah, it was. I think we have literally 3 terabytes of just prep footage. So at first we were just testing with my mum's Ford Fiesta car, just suction cup mounts and other kind of mounts. We had to figure out, it sounds so technically silly, but rubber suction cups have a tiny bit of give in them when you mount the camera to, say, a window or a bonnet or something. And then we also had these magnet mounts, and when you use the magnets, it's rock solid, but that means every pothole, every shake comes through. So in certain scenes, we use the rubber ones because it's more gentle on the audience. And then when we get towards the ending finale scene, we'd switch it to the magnets, so you'd feel a bit more of the energy from the road. It was a kind of lovely little accident. We discovered that. And then we only had the one camera throughout most of testing. So we kind of planned out the multicam stuff, but we had to wait until we got the rentals for the other 3 other cameras to sort of make sure all that worked. And it was a bit of a scramble because we only had, I think, 2 days spare before we started shooting to test the rig in that way. We tested the wireless range before, and the wireless range we had about, I'd say about 40 meters between the vehicles if we needed it. But the issue was if you went around a corner and the other car was too far back, that's when the buildings might break the sight line and you might get some stuttering. We used a Hollyland Mars 300 Pro as the wireless thing. And that was pretty good at reconnecting the signal if it lost it. So we didn't have too many problems. Funny enough, the main issue was actually if the front vehicle was too close to the actor's cab and then they braked, for anything in the road, the red lights would spill onto all the actors' faces. So we had to say to our front driver, can you drive as gently as possible, preempt everything, and just try to let it naturally slow down without you ever touching the brake. And thankfully, Tom Hutley is such a pro that he could do that. And we also shot at quite low speed. London speed limit is largely 20 miles an hour now. And I think actually most of the film was at 10 to 15. If there was no other traffic around, we just didn't see the need to go quicker. Yeah.
Yeah, and testing all the camera positions was, we knew going into the cab, because we had our one camera and we had the cab, and we just knew that every camera position and every lens change would impact where we could place the other 3 cameras. So we have this file still that's, I think it's 286 placements of where each camera could theoretically go and how it would impact, the combinations of where you could put the other ones, with all the safety concerns. That was nights of just kind of sitting in the cab, moving positions of, I was usually the actor, you were rigging the cameras, and just trying to keep everything not reflected in the plexiglass barrier. But we did run into the surprise issue once we started testing the movement of, we had accounted for all of that, but we didn't account for, if you're driving down a road and a street light is shorter than the other street light, it causes a different reflection.
Well, it's a shadow.
In a shadow.
It's a shadow, really, yeah.
Yeah. And so we would run into these things of like camera bodies passing over, the shadows of them, over characters. But because we shot multicam with 4 cameras, we were so...
We had enough footage to cut around it usually.
Yeah.
And we did redo the routes. So nearly every single scene has more than one take. Or like setup, I should say. So we always, avoided a shadow at a key moment.
Yeah.
But that was stressful. And that did add a lot to the edit. And thankfully the actors as well gave quite consistent performances. So when you're cutting between those, you don't realize that's going
on. Samantha, filming in London, really early nights, early mornings. Bertie, you were saying before, like 1 a.m., London pretty much shuts down. It's kind of the same here in Sydney now. There's pretty much no nightlife in Sydney now as well. Pretty much everything shuts down and such. But there's still, cabs and people want to get around and do things and such. But so when you're filming in London at night, especially in those early hours, even though London is kind of shut down, is there still moments where there could be people thinking that you guys are a real cab and trying to, I don't know, interrupt the process of that? Because I'm sure that in your risk assessment, human factors in regards to that would have definitely come into play. And if it did it happen frequently, or was it something that didn't happen as much as you thought it would?
Yeah, it was, honestly, we were so lucky with the lockdowns. It didn't happen that often.
So you're during lockdown, so you shot this. Okay, cool. All right.
Yes. So that was, honestly, I don't think we could have made the film without the lockdowns. Traffic alone would have just stopped us dead. But whenever Ladi was on camera, he was obviously driving. But when we weren't shooting, I was the driver of that cab. And I did get hailed just a couple times in central London, with people quite disappointed that I wouldn't pull over. But our cab light wasn't on. You don't have a working cab light when you're not a professional cab. And I did get pulled over by the police once, which for not having a cabbie license, which is displayed on the back of the cab. So it's good that the police do their job and check. But yeah, I did get pulled over while we were filming with one of our friends, who's one of the montage passengers in the back seat, and had to just kind of politely inform the police that no, it's a private vehicle. I think they were very confused when I rolled down the window and was American and then asserting that it was a private vehicle, but they were happy with it, sent us on our way, and we just left thinking, oh, they do check this. Great.
Bertie, what's the advantages of having a small crew when filming like this? Is there a certain, because if you're filming in London, and I imagine London, like other capital cities, permits and all sorts of permissions you're going to have, is there a certain things you can get away with having a small crew? Like you just say you had a dozen people on there. Is there a difference between shooting with a dozen people as opposed to shooting with, I imagine any night it could have been anywhere between 4 to 6 or 7 people in there? And if so, if there is a differences, having done it small because you had to go small because it's an independent, ultra low budget independent movie, does that really bring about a lot of advantages in filming in places that you usually might not be able to film, especially even at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. So there's a kind of cliff. If you go over 5 people, you get into trouble. So
Okay.
there's a rule in London that is, if you're 5 or less on the street and you don't create a public disturbance, a danger, or an obstruction, that you're allowed to shoot without a permit. It's really intended for journalists. So if they've got to do a piece to camera in front of the Houses of Parliament, they don't have to call around and get permits to do that. They can just do it. But we took that 5 or less people rule and just applied it to the whole film. And it meant that when we were in those kind of landmark locations, we would keep anyone not being used in the literal shot inside one of the vehicles, so they weren't encountered in the 5. And usually it was, myself, a sound man, and then maybe you out and about as well with us. And then the 2 actors in the scene. If we had 3 actors in the scene, then we would change up the group of people. But yeah, that's how we got around it. And if we did inquire about one, permit issue, and it just became a nightmare. We just realized, oh, you'd be talking about closing streets, having police presence. Immediately, the budget's going sort of 10 grand for one scene, which we could not have done the film at all with that restriction.
Yeah, that was the one we inquired a permit for. And we also ended up in this weird bureaucratic like chicken and egg situation where they're like, okay, you need a permit, but you don't have enough people to get a permit, but you need a permit. And eventually we just went, okay, we can just do this then, because we couldn't, like, none of the box tickings worked on anyone's website. So we're like, okay, we're done then.
I mean, we did ask, is this okay? And they went, well, I couldn't advise it is okay, but I couldn't advise it isn't okay. And I was like, well, we're going to take that guerrilla filmmaking spirit there and just do it. Yeah. And we didn't get any complaints from the public or police making it at all. We had the police walk through one of our locations while we were doing it, and they just said, oh, what are you doing? Told them, and they were like, yeah, carry on. So it was fine.
Yeah.
I imagine during that time of lockdowns as well would have been great to just see some people out there doing some stuff and getting some sort of like activity happening in the streets and in the creative community and stuff like that. So if there was any troubles with that, that would have been a real shame. But it's glad to see that there is. And then I love hearing stories about guerrilla filmmaking. I've watched this documentary about Larry Cohen about a few years ago, and some of the stuff that he did as well. And they weren't even doing digital. They had big cameras and such. And there was one story he did where he was in the Empire State Building and he had his extras fire blanks so he could get the crowd freaked out and then running from the police. I was like, man, no one, I don't think we're going to have that anymore. Thankfully, you guys didn't do that. But That's pretty cool that still that the independent spirit's out there with the whole grilling filmmaking aspect. Because if you got to do what you got to do, then you have to do it, right? So,
exactly.
Samantha, yep, for sure. I wanted to ask about a little more in regards to the story. We just talked about the filmmaking, but in the story on its own. So, one aspect, there's 2 things in this movie that are very traditional centric in regards to London. Number one, the black cap. Okay, that's one thing. The other is when it comes to the genre aspect of the film, it's a murder mystery, and it has to do with the deaths of sex workers. And we're talking about, all the way back to Jack the Ripper. It's a very kind of London thing, the London Ripper, all this kind of stuff coming up as well. Was that an idea that you guys always had in mind in regards to going down that road, considering just how much it is traditionally a very kind of classic kind of trope to stick with in regards to a murder mystery set in London, and also much like how like you had Ladi kind of delve into the world of kind of like the black cabs and such. Do you guys have to delve into the world of the underground in regards to sex work in London, what it's like now as compared to other back then? And if so, was there perceptions that you had about that line of work beforehand that's different to now? Having done the film, I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, it kind of was always something we wanted to do because we want to lean into kind of the classic noir tropes. We really enjoy a lot of the classic detective movies. And as you said, London has this history with Jack the Ripper, the Soho district. There's lots of that stuff going on. I didn't want to make it like too exploitative in any way. And I didn't want to lean into that. And I wanted it to feel much more modern. And these days, London has quite a mixture of kind of underground industry going on. And I did like a little bit of research into kind of the higher class escorts, the ones that are more in the business world, I guess you could say, people who have online presences, because that's kind of where the industry is. It's something that I'm definitely an outsider of. And I did learn quite a bit. we had a lot of our actresses looked into it as well, and we're trying to figure out how to we want to embody these characters where they're women first. They're women first, and they have this job. We did, while shooting, we did encounter one sex worker for real who did approach us, and that was an interesting thing to kind of see for real, because it was similar to one of our characters in the way that they approach Ladi. So it was a interesting thing to research, and just trying to remember that I wanted them to just be full women first, who just happen to have this job for whatever reason. And yeah, go in with some of the tropes and just kind of hint at that world, because the entire movie is from Eddie's perspective, and he does not know that world. So it wouldn't have felt authentic for the film to go into detail or to bring out the backstories of all these women. It had to feel like Eddie is learning about it for the first time. So trying to strike that balance was tricky.
It was also the people that are literally out and about in London at 2 a.m. who you might see. You know, I vividly remember seeing, frankly, a very attractive escort walking down one of the central London streets all alone, and thinking that's so surreal to see a young woman out at 2:30 a.m. It was pretty obvious, like just leaving a hotel in that way. And I was just thinking, she's quite vulnerable here, and she's definitely trying to go to a black cab, I think, to get home. So yeah, we thought there was a kind of element of truth in that, like it does happen.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. When it comes to going into those kind of elements, the kind of genre elements and such, because I know I've read an interview where you guys said when it came to the filmmaking aspect, you're watching a lot of features of first-time directorial features and movies kind of similar in regards to, you know, the shooting aspects, you know, films like Locke and other films as well. But when it comes to those kind of more genre kind of aspects of it, myself, I pick up a little bit of De Palma in there, not so much in the shooting style, but in the themes of the film and other stuff. What type of filmmakers do you look at in regards to that? What type of filmmakers inspire you guys to kind of delve down that type of storytelling?
Well, we looked, because of the vehicle nature, we were looking at Under the Skin, You Were Never Really Here. You know, I know they have big stars in them. They are still quite low budget affairs, and it was sort of, how can you develop menace without having big action scenes and stuff? And those films both succeeded that in just a quiet conversation. I think as well, we just naturally watch a lot of these kind of films. So, and you listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and stuff. So we kind of came at it through that thinking. Yeah, and we even went back to things like, you know, 28 Days Later, with the kind of filming in London with no one around. Funnily enough, actually, we heard that there's a deleted scene from 28 Days Later where they shot in their black cab, and Danny Boyle really swears about how difficult it is to shoot in cabs.
Yeah.
So the fun little
It was
discovery.
fun. We went back and looked at a lot of the classic films, which we like anyway, things like Chinatown or LA Confidential, and you know, going back to even just the Hitchcock classics to just figure out, you know, how the suspense is working, how a story is teased out. And I mean, we watch a lot of films anyway, but yeah, anything that had a vehicle we were watching, and anything that just had a sort of femme fatale. I mean, and that's everything from what's that comic book style movie even that I'm trying to think
Sin
of?
City.
Even Sin City, even though it's like so far removed, we were watching everything to just kind of see any hint of themes, of tropes that we liked, that we wanted to do. And a lot of anything shot in London, trying to watch how they shot London and how they went from, you know, the London Eye to Tower Bridge in about 1 second, and wanting to avoid that.
Yeah. We didn't want to base it any too strongly on anyone else, though. We were very conscious that with the camera testing and everything, we just wanted to come up with our own way of doing it, really. So it was loose inspiration. There was no really, you know, specific film that we were copying or anything.
Bertie, you mentioned earlier about how you guys pretty much destroyed a computer. I imagine that was during the editing process, because 30 terabytes of footage is all from what I've read in regards to how much you guys shot. And I can imagine why. I mean, you have so many cameras and you have, you know, so many things going on. So when it comes to editing this film, how much pre-prep is in that as well? Do you guys storyboard? Do you do anything like that? Or is it pretty much a thing of let's get all of our multi-angle shots, see what works best in regards to the lighting, the shadows and everything you had, and then put the puzzle piece together that way?
Yes, normally I would much prefer to storyboard or at least pre-plan out the sequences. And some of the on the street stuff is storyboarded, like discovering the body, where we knew that we were going to have that specific location. They were all planned out. But other moments where we were kind of more run and gun, we just had to get the coverage and then more like a documentary editor put it together. The driving sequences, as Samantha mentioned, we did have the 280 angles that we pre-selected and pre-figured out, and we knew exactly which angles we were going to use for which scenes, so the driving scenes don't all feel the same. And we literally use the cinematography to kind of mirror the mood of the scene. So, for example, there's one character who reoccurs through the film, the Rachel character, and at first their relationship is quite distant and quite frosty. So we literally would separate them by using wider lenses so that they appear smaller in the frame. And we would shoot through the glass or through the perspex barrier. So they're always separated. And then as their relationship develops through the film, we bring the cameras more in, we bring them closer and closer in the shots. So by the end, we're giving nice, pretty close-ups on both actors. That kind of thing we all pre-planned. But yeah, we were leaving each take to run for kind of 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then putting that to multicam timelines. And then we've got, 2 or 3 takes with different angles. So you've got 12 angles. And it was just brutal on the computers. I don't think we had enough RAM. So by the end, honestly, the edit suite would work for about 30 minutes and then crash. And I was just living with hell for about a year with that. So, but we did it. So.
Not enough RAM. That's pretty much the motto for a lot of filmmakers these days, I think, that trying to get everything done at home. Yeah, and trust me, us content creators have the same problem as well. I was only trying to edit a video last night and the whole thing went. That's I don't know. Maybe it's the programs, maybe it's just too much footage. I don't know, but yeah, I think it's terrific how you put it all together, though, because I imagine having all those multi angles and all the puzzle pieces and all the work you kind of put in there, that when you hit that, that last edit, you hit last button and it's ready to go, that it would have been just a major relief for you. But do you have to step away for a little while after that?
Yeah.
Do you kind of have to step away and say, I love you, but right now I don't like you, kind of thing, in regards to your movie?
Yeah, I mean, we did do a very quick edit straight after we finished shooting for about 2 weeks, just to make sure we had essentially got some kind of film done, just that we had all the scenes and we had all the angles that we needed. And then we left it for about 6 weeks. And we came back. It took a long time, as I said, about a year to go through it all and edit it. And then even after that, there were additional things we had to do with, say, posters or, preparing the website even. So yeah, I think we're now at the point where we, as you said, we love it, but we are ready to move on. But that is only because it's been so much work.
Yeah, and we would take breaks if we got stuck on something. We would take, you know what, we're just going to step away for 2 weeks and we're not going to open it. We're just not going to do it. So that's kind of why the edit took around a year in total as well, because I think we did 3 or 4 of those over the course of it, which you also just need when you've directed, written, and now you're editing something. You get too close to it, or you just start taking the memories of the emotions you felt while you were on set, and you won't make a good edit if you're basing it on emotions from set. So we had to remind ourselves of that frequently and just kind of take a break, which was good for our sanity.
Yeah.
Samantha, if there's one thing I've learned in order to use talking to filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers, it's one thing to make a film, it's another thing to get that film out there. Trying to get distribution, trying to get it out there, especially when the marketplace is as large as it is now as well. Trying to get it out there, trying to break through. You two were pretty much like the two-man band here, right? So throughout the whole process of this, including trying to sell the movie and getting the distribution as well. I can only imagine just how much of a frustration that would have been, because it's something that you love, but you need to convince someone else that they have to share the same love that you have as well. Did you have any idea just how much of a battle that would have been? Because I spoke to so many filmmakers, and sometimes it just seems like they're like, it feels like this thing that they made might not get out there. And it happens, right? It happens because the movie's good. And it happened with Midnight Taxi because the movie's great. It works well. That's why it's out there and people are watching it. But I imagine the process of it, though, you were saying before, dealing with the bureaucracy in regards to, permits and all that. I imagine dealing with a lot of that stuff in regards to distribution as well would have been much, much worse. But at the end, rewarding, you learn something from it, but I'm sure it would have been a lot of growing pains in regards to it.
Yes, distribution was, since the literal first moment that we thought of the idea and we decided we're going to make our feature film, like this is the moment we're going to do it. My eyes have always been on distribution as the final goal. I'm very aware of how hard distribution is when you're an indie film, even when you're not an indie film, like the nightmares that can happen in marketing distribution. But I was also very aware that it was the part of the industry I knew the least about. So I did a lot of reading. I did as much, talking to people as I could. That's the downside of when you work in the studio system for a bit. Everybody's going off the studio system and they can't really advise on the indie side of it. But they try, and it was so helpful to just get opinions from people on what we were doing. But we learned a lot about delivering a film, which is something we had never had to do before. And we were well prepared for it. But the act of getting distribution, it was a challenge. We were aware of the statistics going in. We were super fortunate that we got into this event called the London Screenings. They pick 6 kind of first filmmakers a year to add to their sales market. And that was like a 3 or 4 day event that Film London run. And they introduce you to all these sales agents, all these distributors. So you learn what that world is. You learn who these people are, which helps so much when you're trying to sell a product, and which is what a film becomes once you're in that stage, which was very hard. That took a long time for me to reconcile. But after that, we ended up getting approached, but I think it was 4 distributors in the end. And we negotiated quite seriously with 2 before we signed with Slated, who are our distributors. That was a very interesting process. Again, lots of reading. We also both come from a business school background. I have a finance degree, so it wasn't completely foreign territory to kind of be negotiating, but it was definitely a learning curve. And wow, there were so many parts that you have to figure out and navigate after you hit final render.
Yeah, I mean, they're very blunt with you. It's your baby, and they don't care. They're just like, this is a business thing. It is, we're putting it in the market for money, basically. So they don't look at it like you do, and they're quite matter of fact about everything, which was a bit, bit of a shock, but it all worked out.
I imagine that if you guys had a time machine, you can go back like a year or so. I imagine when you were doing the negotiations and such, the advice you would give is, hey, don't take it personally. It's just how it is. That'll be the number one advice you'll give to your past self.
Probably, yeah. And I think just trying to stay calm. I think we were just getting very stressed about everything and tearing our hair out and doing everything we could to kind of present them a good package and also sound like we knew what we were talking about. But it was nerve-wracking. And I'm really relieved we've gone with Slated. They've been, great to talk with.
Yeah, and I would definitely say don't take anything personally is good advice for every aspect of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Like there's so much like rejection and criticism, some of it completely fair and warranted, but if you take it personally, it's just going to bring you right down. So I would give that advice to myself. I'd give it to myself every morning I wake up. So I would definitely go back in time and do it again.
Well, I hope you guys do take this one personally, but I'm going to say I actually absolutely love Midnight Taxi. I love what you guys have done here. Because what I really dug about it is that not only is it great to read about and talk to you guys about the aspect of getting the film together, which I have such great admiration for as someone who watches films and learns all about films. It's always great to talk to filmmakers about their movies. But when watching the film and watching the Ladi's kind of like descent into not only his own psychological kind of like discoveries, but also kind of like the murder mystery aspect of it as well, and just the creation of it and the look of it as well. Some of the great shots inside the cab, like some of the reflection shots as well, I thought it was just really remarkable how you guys pulled off some of that stuff in there as well. And and for everyone out there listening, Midnight Taxi out now, video on demand, digital. Watch it. This is a really great movie to watch, kind of like a Friday night, get the blanket out, get some popcorn and watch it. It's a really kind of engrossing kind of murder mystery film that I really dig. I dig films like that. I know you can tell the posters behind me, but I got a lot of those kind of posters there. And I take heaps. And so Bertie and Samantha Speirs, I thank you both very much for your time. Congrats on the film, and it's great that it's out there. And hopefully you guys are going to go out there and do another one. And when you do, let me know. I'd love to watch it and talk about that as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Cheers.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.